What happens when one of Hollywood's most enigmatic actors sits down with The View's most controversial host and things go completely off the rails? Well, buckle up because what you're about to witness is one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about what happened here. The tension was palpable from the moment Joaquin Phoenix walked onto The View set. You could cut the atmosphere with a knife. Phoenix, known for his intense method acting and deeply personal approach to his craft, had come on the show to discuss his latest film project, a documentary about factory farming that had been gaining serious awards buzz. But Joy Behar, never one to stick to the script, had other plans entirely. "So, Joaquin," Joy began, her voice carrying that familiar edge that regular viewers know all too well, "I have to ask you about this whole vegan thing. I mean, come on, don't you think you're being a little dramatic about the whole meat industry? It's just food, right?" Phoenix shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly. Anyone who knows Phoenix understands that his commitment to animal rights isn't just a Hollywood trend for him, it's a core part of who he is as a person. "I wouldn't call exposing systematic cruelty to billions of sentient beings dramatic, Joy. I'd call it necessary. But surely you can see how normal people might find it a bit preachy," Joy pressed on, completely ignoring the warning signs that were already starting to show on Phoenix's face. "I mean, my audience watches this show to relax, not to be lectured about their lunch choices." The other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and the rest of the panel, could sense the temperature in the room rising. Whoopi tried to jump in with a diplomatic comment about respecting different viewpoints, but Joy was just getting started. "Look, Joaquin, I respect your passion, I really do," Joy continued, though her tone suggested anything but respect. "But don't you think there are bigger problems in the world than worrying about chicken nuggets? I mean, we've got wars, poverty, climate change, and you're worried about cows?" Phoenix's jaw tightened visibly. His hands, which had been resting calmly on his lap, began to clench into fists. "Joy, with all due respect, factory farming is one of the leading causes of climate change. It's responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire transportation sector. So when you ask if there are bigger problems, you're actually talking about the same problem." "Oh, come on," Joy laughed dismissively, waving her hand as if swatting away his words. "That's just activist talking points. You can't seriously believe that eating a hamburger is going to destroy the planet." The camera caught Phoenix's expression changing in real time. The calm, thoughtful demeanor he'd walked in with was rapidly being replaced by something much more intense. His voice, when he spoke again, carried a dangerous edge that made everyone on set sit up a little straighter. "Joy, I've spent years researching this. I've visited these facilities. I've seen what happens behind closed doors. When you dismiss it as activist talking points, you're dismissing the suffering of billions of animals and the destruction of our environment. Is that really the position you want to take on national television?" Joy, either oblivious to the growing tension or perhaps feeding off it, doubled down. "Look, sweetie, I've been doing television longer than you've been acting. I know what plays with audiences and what doesn't. And let me tell you, lecturing soccer moms about their grocery choices isn't going to win you any fans." "Sweetie?" Phoenix repeated, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. The word hung in the air like a loaded weapon. The other hosts exchanged nervous glances. Whoopi tried once again to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "Maybe we could talk about your acting process for the documentary," she suggested hopefully. But Joy wasn't having it. "No, I want to finish this point. Joaquin, you live in a Hollywood bubble. You have personal chefs, unlimited money, access to the finest organic everything. It's easy to be self-righteous when you don't have to worry about feeding a family on a budget." Phoenix's eyes flashed dangerously. "You think this is about money? You think I care about factory farming because I can afford not to?" "Joy, I grew up in poverty. My family lived in a car. We knew what it was like to struggle for every meal. But even then, even when we had nothing, we understood that causing unnecessary suffering was wrong." "Oh, please," Joy scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "The sob story routine? Really? You're one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood. Don't try to play the poverty card with me." That was the moment everything changed. Phoenix's entire body language shifted. He leaned forward in his chair, his voice rising for the first time since the interview began. Sob story? You think growing up hungry is a sob story? You think watching my brother struggle with addiction because of the trauma we experienced is a sob story? You think dedicating my life to reducing suffering in the world is some kind of performance? The studio audience, which had been murmuring quietly throughout the exchange, fell completely silent. Even the cameramen seemed to freeze in place, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Joy, for the first time since the interview began, seemed to realize she might have crossed a line, but instead of backing down, she made the catastrophic decision to push even harder. Look, everyone has trauma, Joaquin, but most of us don't use it as an excuse to judge other people's life choices. Maybe you should focus on healing yourself instead of trying to save every cow on the planet. The words hit Phoenix like a physical blow. His face went through a rapid series of expressions: confusion, hurt, anger, and finally, something that looked almost dangerous. When he spoke again, his voice was barely controlled. Excuse me? Did you just minimize my family's trauma and then suggest I'm using it to judge people? Joy, do you have any idea what you just said? Joy, perhaps realizing she was in over her head but too proud to admit it, tried to backpedal while somehow making things worse. I'm just saying that maybe your personal issues are clouding your judgment on this whole animal rights thing. It's not that complicated. Phoenix stood up so abruptly that his chair nearly tipped over backward. The silence that followed was deafening. Phoenix towered over the table, his chest rising and falling rapidly, his eyes locked on Joy with an intensity that made everyone else on the panel visibly uncomfortable. For a moment, it seemed like he might just walk off the set entirely. Instead, he slowly sat back down. But his posture remained rigid, coiled like a spring ready to snap. Joy, he said, his voice now carrying a deadly calm that was somehow more frightening than if he had been shouting, I want to make sure I understand what just happened here. You invited me on your show to talk about a project I care deeply about. When I tried to explain why this issue matters, you called me dramatic. When I provided facts, you called them talking points. When I shared my personal experience, you called it a sob story. And now you're suggesting that my family's trauma has somehow damaged my ability to think clearly. Is that an accurate summary? Joy shifted in her seat, clearly sensing the mood in the room but unable to resist one more jab. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation, Joaquin. Sometimes the truth hurts. The truth? Phoenix's voice cracked like a whip. You want to talk about truth? The truth is that you haven't asked me a single genuine question since I sat down. You've spent the entire time trying to tear down something you clearly don't understand and don't want to understand. Whoopi attempted to intervene again. Maybe we should take a quick break and come back to this topic with fresh energy. No, Phoenix said sharply, never taking his eyes off Joy. I want to finish this conversation. Joy seems to think she knows me better than I know myself. I'd like to hear more of her insights. The sarcasm in his voice was thick enough to cut with a knife. Joy, perhaps misreading his tone as capitulation, seemed to gain confidence. Look, I'm not trying to attack you personally, she said, though her previous comments suggested otherwise. I just think celebrities need to be more careful about using their platforms to push political agendas on regular people. Political agendas? Phoenix repeated, his voice rising again. Caring about animal welfare is a political agenda? Wanting to prevent environmental destruction is a political agenda? Joy, we're talking about basic compassion here. But that's exactly my point, Joy continued, apparently oblivious to the warning signs. You're so convinced that your way is the only right way that you can't see how judgmental you sound. Not everyone can live up to your impossible standards. Phoenix laughed, but there was no humor in it. Impossible standards? Joy, I'm not asking people to be perfect. I'm asking them to consider the consequences of their choices. But you've made it clear that you're not interested in considering anything. You've already decided that caring about suffering is somehow wrong. I never said caring is wrong, Joy protested. I said being preachy is wrong. There's a difference. Is there? Phoenix shot back. Because from where I'm sitting, It seems like anyone who challenges your worldview gets labeled as preachy. Tell me, Joy, what causes do you care about? What issues make you passionate enough to speak up? Joy looked taken aback by the question. Well, I care about many things. Women's rights, democracy, social justice. And when you talk about those issues on this show, do you consider yourself preachy? When you criticize politicians you disagree with, are you being judgmental? Or is it only preachy when someone talks about something you don't want to hear? The hypocrisy was so obvious that even some audience members began to murmur among themselves. Joy's face flushed red, and for the first time in the interview, she seemed genuinely flustered. That's completely different, she stammered. Those are important political issues. And this isn't? Phoenix's voice grew stronger, more confident. Climate change isn't important? Animal cruelty isn't important? Or are they only unimportant when addressing them might require you to change something about your own life? Joy's defensive instincts kicked in full force. Don't you dare lecture me about what's important. I've been fighting for causes since before you were born. Fighting for causes, Phoenix repeated slowly. So when you do it, it's fighting for causes. When I do it, it's being preachy. When you speak passionately about your beliefs, it's admirable. When I speak passionately about mine, it's trauma clouding my judgment. Do you see the double standard here, Joy? The other host sat frozen, watching what was clearly becoming a masterclass in debate from Phoenix. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Even the usually unflappable Whoopi seemed at a loss for words. Joy, cornered by her own contradictions, made the critical error of escalating instead of conceding. You know what, Joaquin? Maybe the problem isn't what you believe. Maybe the problem is how you believe it. You're so intense about everything. It's exhausting just watching you. The comment hit like a slap. Phoenix went very still, his eyes narrowing to slits. Exhausting, he repeated quietly. My passion for reducing suffering in the world is exhausting to you. Yes, frankly it is. Joy doubled down. Life is hard enough without constantly worrying about every moral choice. Sometimes people just want to enjoy a meal without feeling guilty about it. Phoenix stared at her for a long moment before responding. Joy, do you know what's truly exhausting? Visiting slaughterhouses and seeing the terror in animals' eyes. Watching forests be cleared for cattle ranching. Meeting farmers whose land has been poisoned by factory farm runoff. But you're right. That is exhausting. Much more exhausting than having to think about where your food comes from. Oh, here we go with the guilt trip again, Joy said dismissively. It's not a guilt trip, Joy. It's reality. But I understand why you don't want to look at it. It's much easier to attack the messenger than to examine the message. Joy's face was now bright red with anger. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me. You don't know anything about my life or my choices. You're absolutely right, Phoenix said, his voice becoming dangerously quiet again. I don't know anything about your life, but you seem to think you know everything about mine. You've spent this entire interview telling me what I think, why I think it, and how my personal experiences have supposedly damaged my ability to reason. So please, enlighten me. What gives you that authority? Joy opened her mouth to respond but found herself speechless. The question hung in the air like a challenge, and everyone in the studio could feel the weight of it. I'm waiting, Joy, Phoenix continued. You've been so confident in your assessments of me. I'm genuinely curious about your qualifications to make them. The silence stretched on, becoming more uncomfortable with each passing second. Joy looked around the table as if hoping one of her co-hosts would rescue her, but they all seemed to have suddenly found their hands very interesting to look at. Finally, Joy attempted to regain control of the situation with what she probably thought was a devastating comeback. My qualification is 20 years of experience talking to actors who think they're more important than they actually are. The words seemed to echo in the studio. Even the audience gasped audibly. Phoenix's face went through a remarkable transformation, from surprise to hurt to something that looked almost like pity. The moment those words left Joy's mouth, something fundamental shifted in the studio. Phoenix sat back in his chair, a sad smile crossing his face as he shook his head slowly. When he spoke again, His voice carried a weight that made everyone lean forward. 20 years of experience? He said softly. 20 years of sitting behind that desk, and that's what you've learned? That actors who care about something beyond themselves think they're more important than they actually are? Joy, perhaps sensing she had finally gone too far, tried to backtrack. Joaquin, I didn't mean… No, please. Phoenix interrupted, holding up his hand. You meant exactly what you said. And you know what? I think you've just revealed more about yourself than you intended to. His voice began to rise, slowly but steadily. You want to know what I think, Joy? I think you're terrified. I think you're absolutely terrified of anyone who cares about something more than their own comfort. Because if caring about others makes someone think they're important, what does that say about people who don't care? Joy's face went pale. That's not what I… You spent this entire interview trying to tear me down, Phoenix continued, his voice gaining power with each word. You dismissed my beliefs, mocked my experiences, minimized my family's trauma, and now you're attacking my character. And why? Because I made a documentary about factory farming? Because I suggested that maybe, just maybe, we should think about the consequences of our actions? The studio was dead silent, except for Phoenix's voice, which was now filling every corner of the room. You know what's really sad, Joy? I came here today excited to talk about this project. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could reach a few people who hadn't considered these issues before. But you made it clear from the first question that you weren't interested in learning anything. You were only interested in tearing down. Joy tried desperately to interrupt. Joaquin, if you'll just let me… Let you what? Phoenix exploded, finally losing all control. The sheer volume of his voice made everyone in the studio jump. Let you dismiss more facts? Let you mock more personal experiences? Let you tell me again how my trauma has damaged my thinking? What exactly would you like me to let you do, Joy? He was on his feet again, but this time there was no mistaking his fury. His hands were shaking, his face was flushed, and his voice carried a raw intensity that no one in that studio had ever witnessed before. You want to know what I think is important, Joy? I think it's important to speak up when you see injustice. I think it's important to use whatever platform you have to make the world a little better. I think it's important to care about something beyond your own immediate gratification. But apparently, that makes me preachy. That makes me damaged. That makes me think I'm more important than I actually am. The cameras captured every word, every gesture, every emotion playing across his face. This wasn't acting. This was pure, unfiltered human emotion. You know what actually makes someone think they're important, Joy? Sitting behind a desk for 20 years and believing that gives you the right to psychoanalyze anyone who disagrees with you. Thinking that your comfort is more important than other beings suffering. Believing that your ignorance is just as valid as someone else's knowledge. Joy looked like she had been physically struck. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. I've spent years studying these issues, Phoenix continued, his voice now carrying a devastating precision. I've talked to scientists, farmers, veterinarians, environmental experts. I've seen the evidence with my own eyes. But you, sitting behind that desk with your 20 years of experience talking to actors, you think you know better. You think your uninformed opinion carries the same weight as documented facts. Whoopi finally found her voice. Joaquin, maybe we should… No, Whoopi, Phoenix said, turning to face her briefly before swinging back to Joy. I'm not done. Because Joy has taught me something important today. She's shown me exactly what we're up against. It's not just the industries that profit from animal suffering. It's not just the politicians who protect those industries. It's people like Joy, who are so committed to their own comfort that they'll attack anyone who suggests there might be a better way. His voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow it carried more power than his shouting had. You asked me if I think I'm more important than I actually am, Joy. Let me answer that question. I don't think I'm important at all. But I think the billions of animals suffering in factory farms are important. I think the planet we're destroying is important. I think future generations who will inherit the mess we're making are important. And if caring about them makes me preachy in your eyes, then I'll wear that label with pride. Joy finally managed to find her voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. Joaquin, I never meant to suggest… Yes, you did. Phoenix cut her off with surgical precision. You meant every word. Because this is who you are, Joy. This is what you do. You tear down anyone who threatens your worldview. You mock anyone who cares too much. You dismiss anyone who asks you to think beyond your own immediate desires. He moved closer to the table, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that was almost physical. But here's what you don't understand, Joy. Some of us can't just turn off our compassion when it becomes inconvenient. Some of us can't ignore suffering just because acknowledging it might make us uncomfortable. Some of us believe that with privilege comes responsibility. And if that makes us exhausting to you, if that makes us preachy, if that makes us think we're more important than we are, then so be it. The studio audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Even the production crew seemed frozen in place. You want to know what's really exhausting, Joy? It's sitting across from someone who has every advantage, every opportunity to use their platform for good, and watching them choose ignorance instead. It's watching someone with a voice that reaches millions of people use that voice to mock compassion and dismiss facts. Phoenix's voice began to break with emotion. My brother died fighting his demons, Joy. He struggled with addiction, with pain, with a world that seemed determined to break him. But even in his darkest moments, he never lost his empathy. He never stopped caring about others. He never used his own pain as an excuse to cause more pain. And you want to tell me that trauma clouds judgment? That caring too much is a weakness? Joy looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Tears were actually forming in her eyes as the full weight of what she had done began to hit her. I came here today to talk about a film, Joy. A film about reducing suffering in the world. And you turned it into a personal attack. You made it about my trauma, my character, my supposed arrogance. But you know what? You've actually done something valuable here today. You've shown your audience exactly what willful ignorance looks like. You've demonstrated what happens when someone is so committed to their own comfort that they'll attack the messenger rather than examine the message. Phoenix stood up straight, his composure returning but his intensity undiminished. So thank you, Joy. Thank you for showing everyone watching what we're really fighting against. It's not just the factory farms. It's not just the environmental destruction. It's the mentality that created them. The mentality that your comfort is more important than their suffering. The mentality that questioning your choices is somehow an attack on your character. He turned toward the camera, addressing the audience directly. To everyone watching this, I want you to know something. Don't let people like Joy convince you that caring is weakness. Don't let them tell you that passion is pathological. Don't let them shame you for giving a damn about something beyond yourself. The world needs more people who care too much, not fewer. Phoenix looked back at Joy one final time, his voice now carrying a note of genuine sadness. And Joy, I genuinely hope that someday you'll understand what you revealed about yourself here today. Because when you attack someone for caring, you're not just hurting them. You're hurting everyone who might have been inspired by their example. The silence that followed was profound and complete. Joy sat motionless, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly. The other hosts looked shell-shocked. The audience seemed to be collectively holding its breath. Phoenix gathered himself, straightened his jacket, and looked directly into the camera one more time. The documentary is called The Price of Convenience. It premieres next month. Watch it, don't watch it, that's your choice. But whatever you do, don't let anyone tell you that caring too much is a character flaw. And with that, Joaquin Phoenix walked off the View set, leaving behind one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history. So there you have it, folks. One of the most intense confrontations ever captured on live television. What did you think about how Phoenix handled Joy's attacks? Was he justified in his response, or did he go too far? Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about celebrities using their platforms to advocate for causes they believe in.